Good afternoon once again, my Eco 2301 student. We're making good progress now, so we have only like a week remaining. There are a few short chapters now in macro that I'm going to be recording to complete. Make sure you're watching all the videos and taking notes and doing your assignments and preparing for the final exams. So the final exam next week on Friday, this coming Friday, is going to cover only from chapters 26, only chapters on macroeconomics. I'm gonna again send you guys an email on Monday to remind you guys the topics where the unemployment, sorry, the final exam is gonna be tested. Okay. Let's switch gear here. We talked about how we measure GDP already. We talked about the concept of economic growth, the financial system. Now today, let's talk about the labor market. So let me share my screen and we'll talk about it. So today we're going to talk about the labor market, unemployment and labor market, labor force participation, okay? Because this is a very important topic in macroeconomics that, the government, through the Labor Department, there's a federal bureau under the Labor Department called the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS. So the job of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is to report to us Americans what the unemployment rate is. That unemployment data is also always released every first Friday of the new month. For example, we're about to hit the month of August. So on August 5th, right, on the first Friday of August, which is actually the day you're taking your final exam, they're going to release the unemployment data for the month of July. That's how they do it. Like for the unemployment for the month of June was released the first Friday of this month of July. So let's talk about it. So here's going to be the outline of this chapter. So I'll talk about how economists define unemployment. And then I'll talk about the different types of unemployment, including frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, cyclical unemployment. And there's also like natural rate of unemployment, which combines frictional and structural. And then, of course, labor force participation rate, again, and some takeaways. So just to begin our discussion here, some unemployment is a necessary consequence of economic growth. Employment in fields such as farming has declined. You guys know that. When you go back in time, like some 400 years ago, the U.S. farm sector used to contribute significantly to the GDP of the United States, right? To the output of the United States. Now, agricultural output only contributes under 1%, under 1 or 2% of GDP, very small. So you can think about, but that doesn't mean that agricultural output has been declining. It basically means that its importance in national output has been declining. You know what I mean? While other jobs such as blacksmith and darkroom technicians have also disappeared, and jobs like typewriter job, because nobody uses typewriter anymore. We all use today's modern keyboard, on a computer, but we used to have typewriters. So if you used to somebody used to type using typewriters in the 1960s, those jobs are no longer available because we have abandoned typewriters. And we're also going to talk about, by the way, there's a famous concept which we call a creative destruction, which basically stipulates that anytime the economy is growing and we're inventing new technologies, those new technologies are going to unleash new jobs in the economy, but we also destroy jobs in all industries. A case in point I just mentioned, we used to use typewriters when we didn't have computers, right? So once we invented the computers, we abandoned the typewriter. So that means we destroyed jobs in the typewriter industry and created jobs in the computer industry. So that's what we call creative destruction. So new jobs have been created in areas like software engineering and in biosciences. We know that there are different types of unemployment with different causes. So we'll talk about that in general. So I want to give you guys can share with you how we can start breaking down this unemployment data. So the labor force, the total labor force that for the United States can be summed up into you take the total number of employed. So the number of employed, the number of Americans who are employed here is going to include both part-time work and full-time work. Whether somebody's working 2 hours a week, 30 seconds a week, as long as you report to government that you're working, we don't care whether it's part-time work or full-time work, you are considered employed. And then unemployment is a scenario where one is willing and able to work at the ongoing wage rate, and they're actively looking for work, but they simply can't find one. Okay? So if we sum, so that means the labor force, I'm going to write it on the side here, the formula for the labor force, you take the total number of Americans who are employed. And again, remember, as I said, employed Americans include those who are part-time and full-time. So then plus unemployed Americans, those without a job. So that's the definition of employment, or the formula that you use for what? Calculating the labor force. And then in every scenario here, we're going to, and then I want to make something very critical here. We'll talk about it shortly anyway. So we're talking about adults not in the labor force. These include things like people like full-time students. So the definition of full-time students, according to the government, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they don't go by your definition of full-time student. Your definition of full-time student is that you must be taking at least 12 credit hours to be considered a full-time student. The Bureau of Labor Statistics definition of full-time student is that you are not working completely because of school. So they don't care whether you're only taking 5 credit hours, 6 credit hours, as long as when they send the survey and you answer in the survey that you are currently not working because of school, you're automatically considered a full-time student. And then we're going to talk about homemakers. If you do something at home, right, you're not going to be part of the, you're not going to be counted as part of the workforce, right? Like, let's say somebody's taking care of their own kids at home, right? Or somebody's mowing their lawn and staying at home. We don't count that as part of employment. That's, it has to be paid work. And then retirees are not part of the labor force. Okay, so these are people who are not in the labor force: full-time students, homemakers, retirees. If you retire, you drop out of the workforce. You're no longer counted as part of the workforce. And others, we'll talk about that later, like not working because of lack of transportation is one of them. Discarded workers are going to be people who are not part of the workforce. So when so all those things then converge. So that means the total labor force here is going to merge with the adults who are not in the labor force. So that gives us adults in the labor force plus a labor force is equal to adult non-institutionalized civilians. And by the way, when we're considering the people who are in the workforce, we don't consider people who are actively serving in the military. So it has to only be civilian workforce. And then the level, okay, but before I go here, the formula for calculating unemployment rate that the government reports to us every month is very simple. The unemployment rate, you see the formula there. We always hear the government say, oh, the unemployment rate for the month of July, say 4.2%. How do they calculate it? Very simple. You take the total number of unemployed Americans and you divide that by the labor force, size of the labor force. And you multiply it by 100. That's the formula for calculating what? The unemployment rate, if you want to put it in percentage. So I know. So now, after we have found out that the labor adults in the labor force plus labor force itself must equal to adult non-institutionalized civilians. When we say non-institutionalized civilians, example of institutionalized civilians are going to be adults who are in prison. So we're not going to count if somebody's in prison, serving sentence in prison, they're not counted as part of the workforce. Okay. So we're only going to be considering the adult non-institutionalized civilians. So the labor force participation rate, that's another statistic which the government is going to use. The labor force participation rate, we're going to take the size of the labor force divided by adult non-institutionalized civilians. Okay. And then when we count now, because remember, we're talking about only adult population here. What's the definition of adult population according to Bureau of Labor Statistics? Because of child labor laws, you're only allowed to work when you're 16 years or older. So that means children aged between 0 and 15 years are not part of the workforce. See, so now when we add those children, American children who are aged 0 to 15 years, then we add military personnel who are not part of the workforce, and institutionalized civilians. That example, people who are in prisons. That gives us a total population of the United States. Okay, so you could actually work yourself upwards from down. You can start with the total U.S. population, and then you're going to say, well, children, military personnel, and institutionalized civilians are not going to be part of the what? The labor force. Okay, so so you take those ones all right away, and then again you go and make some kind of adjustments up there. So labor force participation is going to be like adults who are actually in the workforce, divided by adult population times 100. Okay, so you take the total labor force times adult non-institutionalized civilians times, if you want in percentage, you multiply that by 100. That's going to be your labor force participation rate. Okay, and again, I want to stress that again, when we're talking about adult non-institutionalized civilians, we are meaning adults who are aged 16 years or older. Because 16 years or older, we don't go with the definition of how you define adults, maybe somebody who is 18 years or older, because the working age starts from 16. So it's 16 years or older, and you must not be in an institutionalized, an institution like prison. So you're non-institutionalized civilians only. So let's continue with our definitions here. So unemployment workers are going to be adults who do not have a job, but who are looking for work. That's the definition. You must not have a job, but you're looking for work. So the unemployment rate is going to be the percentage of the labor force without a job. We talked about that already. I want to stress that again. The unemployment rate that the government calculates and reports to us every month. You take the what? The number of unemployed, and you divide that by the labor force. So this is going to give you in decimal, because the number is reported in percentage. That's why we multiply it by what? 100. Okay. For example, if somebody when somebody tells us that if the unemployed was, say, 10 million people, and labor force was, say, 170 million. So that means the unemployment rate, going with this definition, unemployment rate would be substituting this formula. So the unemployment is going to be 10 divided by labor force, which is 170 million times 100. Okay, so you can see this cancel. So you can, so in percentage, that's going to be 100 divided by 17. What that gives us what? Let me check real quick. So that is like, so the unemployment would be approximately what? 5.9%. One decimal point. So that's how we calculate unemployment. Very, very straightforward. So someone is unemployed only if he or she is willing and able to work but cannot find work. So think about that. The definition is very clear. Because the government sends surveys, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the Labor Department that is in charge collecting data on the state of the labor market. Every month, they're going to send surveys to nearly 60,000 American households. So this is the unemployment data is based on a survey. It's not a perfect measure because we're only surveying 60,000 households. And then they're going to ask each member of the family who are adults, who are supposed to be working, or who are eligible to work, are you employed? If you say yes, whether you're working part-time, you are considered employed. If you answer that I'm not, then they're going to ask you, why, have you been actively looking for work over the past month? If you say no, that means you're not unemployed. Because unemployment, you must be willing and able to work, and you must be seeking for work, but you simply can't find one. Okay. So to be counted as unemployed, a person must meet this criteria. You must be 16 years or older. You must be a non-institutionalized adult. That means you're not in prison. And you must be a civilian. And you must be looking for work. Those are the criteria that you're going to be considered. If you are not actively looking for work, when that survey form is sent and you answer in the form that I've not been actively looking for work. Maybe I'm moving with my dad and mom for now, or with my uncle, my rich uncle. I live with them. Then you are not going to be counted as unemployed. Okay, so let's talk about how we can further define unemployment here. So you can see that the unemployed, if these are the total number of employed Americans, and then these are the red one, the total number of unemployed, we know that the sum of employed and unemployed people in the United States gives you the size of the labor force. The labor force is the sum of the two. I wrote the formula earlier. And then we're going to have the definition of unemployed is that you must be an adult, a non-institutionalized civilian, you're without a job, and you're actively looking for work. That's what we talked about. You're gonna meet this criteria of being unemployed. And then the other category of people we talked about, there are people who are not in the labor force. And that include the military, children aged 0 to 15 years of age, discouraged workers who have looked for jobs in the past but have given up looking for work. They may include things like retirees, full-time students, okay? So those are some of the examples that we gave earlier on, people who are not in the labor force. They must be children aged 0 to 15. They must be, like full-time students. They must be retirees. Those are discouraged workers, and so on and so forth. Handicap, people with a disability, not working because of disability, you also drop out of the workforce. If you report to government that you have a severe disability, that you cannot work, but not for all forms of disability qualify you to be given that disability insurance or whatever. But you tell the government that you're completely disabled, or so your disability cannot allow you to perform any job, then you're not part of the workforce. Okay. So this is a large number of people too. Not people who are not in the workforce. Okay, so another example here. In June 2017, 7 million people were unemployed in the United States. 153.2 million were employed. Together, we know that we can calculate the labor force, because the labor force is the sum of unemployed and employed. So if you add 7 million unemployed Americans, as per June 2017, and add that to 153.2 million Americans who are employed, that gives you the total number of what they call the labor force. So the labor force is going to be what? 160.2 million people, of which we can calculate the unemployment rate. So the unemployment rate is going to be equals to unemployed, take down, divide by the number of unemployed, because unemployed plus employed and unemployed give you the labor force. Or you could just simply say the unemployment rate equals to unemployed divided by the labor force. Labor force you already found is 160.2 when you added employed and unemployed people together. And then you multiply that number by 100. So the number says 7 million Americans divided by 160.2, which is labor force times 100. So the unemployment rate as of June 2017 was at 4.4%. So that's not a very not difficult to figure out. So another question, if 2 million people are unemployed and 8 million are employed, then the unemployment rate is, so that's pretty straightforward. So the first thing you do here, you're going to say, what is my labor force? So labor force equals to number of employed Americans, and then you add to it the number of unemployed. That's the first thing you have to figure out there. So that means the labor force here is going to be the total number of employed is what we have been told is 2 million. No, sorry, 8 million. Plus the total number of unemployed, we've been told there are 2 million Americans, as per, okay, so that gives me 10 million. So therefore, unemployment rate, as we said earlier on, you take the total number of unemployed divided by the labor force. And you multiply this by 100 because you want it 100 in percent. So this is going to be equals to unemployed is 2 million divided by labor force, which is 10 million. So the million cancel. So that's going to, and then you multiply this number by 100. So that's going to be the same thing as 1/5 times 100. So this gives you an unemployment rate of 20%. 1/5 times 100 is 20%. So the correct answer there should be B, as you see there. And then so the labor force participation rate, as we said earlier, this is the percentage of adults who are in the labor force. Because when we say that there are some adults who are not supposed to be in the labor force, such as what? People who are actively serving in the military. People who are in institutionalized in institutions like prisons. Okay, so there must be none. People who are counted as part of the workforce, there must be there must be non-institutionalized what? Adults. They should be adults who are not in prisons or some sort like that. If you're in prison, you're not part of the workforce. If you're part of the workforce, you must be age 16 years or older, so children are not part of the workforce. You must not be retired. If you're retired, you're not part of the workforce. You must not be a full-time student. If you're a full-time student, you drop out of the workforce. And as I said before, the definition of full-time student, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is different from your definition. As long as you answer in that survey form that you are not working because of school, the Bureau of Labor Statistics does not care whether you're taking 5 credit, 6 credit, as long as you say, as a matter of fact, you could be taking 20 credit hours and working 10 hours a week. You are considered employed. You're going to be part of the workforce. The idea is that you must work 0 hours. And if you tell them that I'm not working because of school, that means you're working 0 hours. Then you are considered not to be in the workforce. So the labor force participation rate, labor force participation rate, which in short, you can write as LP, LFPR. You're going to take the size of the labor force, then you divide that by what we call non-institutionalized adult population, and multiply that by 100. Okay. So the unemployment, especially if it's long-term, can be financial and psychologically devastating. You know that. If you lose a job and you can't find one in the next 6 months or 12 months or beyond, it can be. There are so many Americans or so many people who go into depression. In Europe, we have had cases where people even committing suicide because they cannot find a job, you know. Unemployment also means that the economy is underperforming, because if there are so many Americans who are not working, who are without jobs, that means we are not producing enough output, okay? Because there are fewer workers who are working. So the economy, GDP might be small because of high unemployment, okay? So the unemployment rate is the single best indicator of how well the labor market is working, but it is an incomplete indicator. Why? Because it does not include discouraged or underemployed workers. So the definition of underemployed workers is going to be things like, let's say somebody has a PhD in chemistry and is working as an Uber driver or a taxi driver. Then that person is doing a job that is below maybe their qualification, or that could even be only just part-time job work. So we're going to say that such a person is underemployed, okay? Or somebody that's a PhD in economics and they're flipping burgers at McDonald's. Then that is not, that is underemployment. Discouraged workers are workers who have given up looking for work, but who would still like a job. Okay. For example, if somebody looked for a work for the past year and they didn't find one, they were unsuccessful. They may give up looking for one, you know. Okay, so then you become a discarded worker. So one definition is workers who want and are available for work and who have looked for a job sometime in the last year, but not in the last month, because they believe that no jobs were available for them. So they gave up looking for work after trying for a long time. Using this definition, the number of discarded workers is small relative to the number of unemployed. So some economists argue that if we include discarded workers as to be part of the workforce or the part of the unemployed, the unemployment rate would be a little higher. See? So this is the red line you're seeing from 1994 to more recent times. That's the unemployment, which is official unemployment rate that the government reports to us, which excludes discouraged workers. If we include discouraged workers, you can see that will give us a blue line. That's unemployment rate, including unemployed and discouraged workers. Okay, so unemployment would shoot up a little bit because of if discarded workers were counted as part of the unemployed. So I talk about underemployment rate. A Bureau of Labor Statistics measure that includes part-time workers who would rather have a full-time position and people who would like to work but have given up looking for work. So that's how the Bureau of Labor Statistics measure this. And by the way, after learning this topic, you can always go and check more detailed statistics on the state of the US labor market. And you can go back as far as 1920s. The data is available. So that federal bureau that is in charge collecting and storing data and releasing the data on unemployment every month, as I said, is part of the Labor Department. It's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And their website is, during your free time, you can check it out. It's www.bls.gov. So it's a federal bureau. It's a Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay, so the unemployment rate also does not measure the quality of jobs or how well workers are matched to their jobs. As I talked about, a taxi driver with a PhD in chemistry is counted as fully employed. So it's a part-time worker. That's right. Defining and measuring partial employment is very difficult. As of February 9, 2017, the underemployment rate in the United States was about 9.5%. Underemployment. So we're going to talk about underemployment. These are people who might be doing jobs that are beneath their qualification, like a PhD in chemistry, working as a taxi driver, or Americans who are working part-time. Okay. So if you have a chemist, you have a PhD in physics and you're working as a retail clerk, then you are definitely, just talk about it, you're underemployed. Okay. Because you're doing a job which is beneath your qualification. Okay. So now let's talk about the different types of unemployment that exist out there. The first one is what we call frictional unemployment. So frictional unemployment is basically the short-term unemployment caused by ordinary difficulties of matching employee to employer. Okay. Sometimes some economists define it as what? Unemployment. Sorry. Unemployment during the job search process when you're searching for a job. Whether it takes you, okay. So I'm gonna give you other causes of this, but there are some immediate things that should ring in mind. What causes that? When this is a short-term spell of this unemployment could only be, somebody may only be unemployed for 2 weeks, or for 1 month, or for 2 months, then they find another job. So, or some people might say, or you could just say, or unemployment when workers are in between jobs. When workers are in between jobs, then you say you're frictional unemployed between jobs. So example might include, so what could be the possible cause? I'm going to discuss more other causes, but the immediate causes here could be that, one, workers in America are always moving. So geographical mobility of workers and job finding do not happen instantaneously. Do not happen instantaneously. I'll give you an example. If you quit your job in Austin, Texas, because you want to go and live in New York City, so even if jobs are so plentiful in New York City, it's not possible that you're going to arrive in New York City today and start working tomorrow. You need to go and apply for those jobs. You need to be called for an interview. And then, you need to get used to a subway. We don't have subway system in Texas. Okay. So it might take you, so whether it takes you 2 weeks, even 1 week or 1 month or 2 months for you to start begin working in New York City, that spell of time, we say you're in between jobs. We say you're frictionally unemployed. So frictional unemployment can be caused by geographical mobility of workers. Workers leaving one city want to go live in another city. Okay. But if you're moving with your job, then you're not unemployed. Some people just say, maybe they get transferred from their work from Austin that say, okay, you're going to work for another branch of the company in New York City. That is not it. I'm talking about people who completely quit their jobs and they're moving to a new area and then they start looking for a new job in that city where they're going to. Then you're frictional unemployed. But there could be other causes that I'm going to be discussing on the slides as well. One of them could be lack of information. That's what causes frictional unemployment about available jobs. Lack of information. Do you know that your neighbor could have a job that matches your skills? But if you don't talk to your neighbor, you will never know that that job exists. That's a fact. Your neighbor can have a job that matches exactly your skills. But if you're not aware that that job exists, you don't talk to your neighbor, then you're going to be frictional. You're still going to be unemployed. Okay, but let me add additional other factors. So finding a job that you want at a wage that you will accept and that the employer will pay takes time. Okay, so scarcity of information, I'll talk about it. So unemployment, frictional unemployment can be caused by what? Lack of information or about available job or scarcity of information. And then one of the most worrying aspects of the 2007-2009 financial crisis or recession was the increase in long-term unemployment. Okay, let's look at what happened during that recession. So in 2018, the unemployment, you can see that the percentage of Americans who would lose a job and take between 5 to 14 weeks before they find their jobs was 29.8%. Less than 5 weeks was 34.3%. That means they lost their job and within 5 weeks they found a job. More than 27 weeks was 21.4%. And then 15 to 26 weeks, the 14.4%. But look at in 2010, the long-term unemployment. People who are taking more than 27 weeks without finding a job increased from what? From 21.4% to 43.3%. That's huge. And the number of Americans who are taking between 15 to 26 weeks shot from 14.5 to 16%. Okay, 5 to 14 weeks, 22%, and less than 5 weeks was 18.7%. So you're shot up across the board. Because the financial crisis of 2007, 2009, so 2007, 2009 was deep. Okay, so this is like the effect of 2009, 2000 what? 2007, 2009 economic recession. You see, but this is a recent recession like to 2018. Kind of like, when people lose a job, how long it takes them to find the next. It's much shorter compared to what 2010 case scenario. So frictional unemployment is typically a large share of the total unemployed because the U.S. economy is very dynamic. Okay, let me tell you one thing. I can give you a question that if you went to work this morning and you call your supervisor at work an idiot, you're most likely going to be frictionally unemployed because you're going to get fired from the job. Then you're going to start looking for another job. So you're going to be in between jobs. Innovation and competition drive progress, which creates new jobs and destroys all jobs. Creative destruction. We talked about that. In February 2024, 4.59 million new jobs were created. I talk about this idea of creative destruction, that because of innovation and new technologies, new technologies are always unleashing new jobs. Like now we know there's a lot of jobs that require data scientists. People who have skills in data science, skills in artificial intelligence, machine learning. Okay, so those are the jobs that our economy is creating in plentiful. But as the economy creates more new jobs in AI, in technology, we are also destroying all the jobs, in all industries. So that's what we are calling creative destruction. Every year, know that the economy is creating new jobs, but the economy is also destroying all jobs. For example, in 2014, 4.59 million new jobs were created, but there were also 4.38 million jobs that were lost, job separation. So that means in the net new jobs are increased by 210,000. Okay? So you would argue that the 4.38 million jobs, those are jobs that we destroy. Then the second type of unemployment is structural unemployment. So structural unemployment is the persistent long-term unemployment caused by long-lasting shocks or permanent features of an economy that make it more difficult for some workers to find jobs. If you have some long-lasting shocks in the economy, example of such shocks could be things like the oil price shocks, oil shocks. These are shocks to the economy. It could also be things like structural transformation happening in the economy. What do I mean by structural transformation? Our economy 400 years ago used to be dominated by agricultural activities. And then with the economy transformed into industries, manufacturers. And then America, through globalization, we lost industry jobs as well. Because most US companies, due to globalization, have shipped jobs overseas. So we are mostly now a service-based economy. Manufacturing used to account for about maybe 28 to about 40% of national output. Now it's like maybe only under 12%. Because the service sector is about 70% of GDP. So anytime there's structural transformation in the economy, it's going to create some unemployment, and those unemployment becomes structural. Like what we see these days, there's so many Americans who are getting laid out of their job work because they lack skills, because of automation, okay? Because of technology. So that can create long-term unemployment, because those Americans who have lost jobs because they no longer have the skills that the economy needs. If they ever want to find a job again, they need to go back and train and train and train. So it might take them a long time to find their next job. They need to retool and get their new skills that the employers are requiring in contemporary economy. Okay. So I talk about it. The one cause of structural unemployment is large economy-wide shocks, such as oil shocks that happened in the 1970s, when the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, we talked about that when we were talking about cartel, when they raised the price of oil by, from $7 a barrel to $38 a barrel. That can cause problems even in oil industries and other industries as well. And then other causes also include restructuring as a result of globalization, new information technologies, and the shift from manufacturing to a service economy. I already talked about this. Economy is always going through this structural transformation. Okay? So structural unemployment has significant costs. Loss of economic output. The unemployed suffer higher levels of stress, higher rates of suicide, and lower rates of measured happiness. When people don't have a job for a long time, they become less happy, and then there's depression is always an incident of structural unemployment that could sometimes lead to suicide. So structural unemployment has been a more serious problem in Europe than in the United States because of labor regulations in Europe. So unemployment benefits like minimum wages, unions, and unemployment protection benefit, and these are very strong in Europe than the United States. So all these regulations are more generous and wide-ranging. It can cause permanent change in the economy that can, cause structural unemployment. But the regulation can also increase unemployment rates. We talked about that. So one cause of structural unemployment, as we say, is going to be B, a large, this is just testing, your self-checking, your understanding. We just talked about it's a large economy-wide shock. Okay. So let's talk about how some of our minimum wages and median wages have been highest in Western Europe and have been responsible for higher European unemployment rates than the United States. So this means that the minimum wage in Europe will affect more workers and create more unemployment in Europe than the United States, because minimum wages in Europe are very high. In the United States, the federal minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour. But by the way, in the United States too, there are cities that have taken matters on their own hands because Congress has been very reluctant raising the minimum wage. The last time they raised the minimum wage maybe was in the mid-90s. So some cities like Seattle, Washington, like San Francisco, the minimum wage in San Francisco is like $17 an hour. In Seattle, Washington is like I think like $18 an hour. So if you live in Seattle, Washington, the minimum wage is way higher than the federal minimum wage. I've not seen that happen in Texas. There's no Texas city which has taken matters on their own hand and raised. I mean, most people in Texas we just go with the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25, which is kind of bad though when you think about it, because the cost of living. I saw there's a lady who posted something. She lived in Dallas with her 2 kids. She posted like a caption on her Instagram. She said, in 1995, she lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in just outside of Dallas. The minimum wage then was $7.25. And then a 2-bedroom apartment was $500 a month. She said by 2022, she still lives in the same apartment. The minimum wage has not changed, still $7.25. But the 2-bedroom apartment is now $2,500. Jump up 5 times. Then she asked a question, where the hell does the state legislature or the federal government expect us to live if they cannot raise the minimum wage to keep like low income or minimum wage people make a living wage? I think she had a point. So if you raise the minimum wage so much though, like in Europe, it could cause unemployment, especially teen unemployment among young workers. In 2014 in France, 23% of workers younger than the age of 25 were unemployed. Think about that. While in the United States, it was only 13%. So let's discuss how minimum wage can cause unemployment. By the way, the minimum wage was passed into law. The first minimum wage that was passed into law was passed in 1938. And do you know how much the minimum wage was then? It was like 20 cents on the dollar. But 20 cents on the dollar was a lot of money in 1938. So then Congress kept on raising it. From now, we have it up to $7.25. So when you ask me, why did Congress decide to start demanding that employers at least pay a minimum wage? Anybody who pays somebody a wage below, hourly wage below $7.25 will be breaking the law. Because Congress believed that, politicians believed that the free market had failed American workers. Free market was setting a wage that was significantly lower, that Americans would not derive any living from such type of market wage. So this diagram that I draw here, this is a labor market. And when you talk about labor market, any market has got a supply side and a demand side. We already talked about that. So when we draw the diagram for a market like the labor market like this, price always goes on the vertical axis. The price of labor is the wage, it's the hourly wage. You know that. So the price of labor wage goes on the vertical axis, and then on the horizontal axis, we are measuring the quantity of workers or the number of labor hours that workers want to supply. You remember, you can measure the quantity of labor in 2 ways. You can measure in terms of the number of people, okay? The total labor supply, people who are willing to work. And or you can measure in terms of the total number of hours that workers are able to supply. So the labor supply curve is upward sloping. Okay, similar to any labor supply curve, any supply curve you've seen in the past. That means if the wage is high, people want to supply more work. If the wage is low, see, people don't want to go to work. They don't want to supply because it doesn't. If somebody wants to pay you $6 an hour, I call in sick every day. But if they're paying you $100 an hour, oh man, you want to work overtime. You make the most money. That's why the labor supply curve is upward sloping. So you could argue that the labor supply curve represents employees, the desire by employees to supply their labor. Meanwhile, the labor demand curve represents employers. That's how you understand this model, represent employers. Because employers are the ones who demand your labor. And the employers think the reverse. The labor demand curve is downward sloping. If the hourly wage is very high, see, like around here, maybe say like $50 an hour. Look, employers want to demand less work. But if the hourly wage is very low, look, the demand for labor is here. They want to demand more. So the labor, in the absence of governmental interference in the labor market, government intervention, the labor markets go to equilibrium. The labor market is in equilibrium when labor supply curve intersect with labor demand. So this is what we call, this gives them what we call a market wage. See this wage here? That's a wage or equilibrium wage. And this would be the market employment. So in this case, nobody would be unemployed because labor supply equals to labor demand. The number of workers who want to work exactly matches with the number of workers that employers are demanding. But then, as I told you in 1938, Congress felt that when the labor market reaches equilibrium, the resulting market wage is too low for American workers. And then Congress decided to set a minimum wage. And the minimum wage is always set above the market equilibrium wage. Look. Okay, so see the minimum wage here. So that means by law, you're not allowed to pay anybody a wage below this line because that's a minimum wage line. In America, that wage would be $7.25. Federal minimum wage is $7.25. As right now, as I talk. So what has the minimum wage done? It can cause some unemployment because if the government sets a wage which is way above the equilibrium wage, at equilibrium, nobody was unemployed because labor supply equals to labor demand. But at the minimum wage, now the labor market is no longer in equilibrium. If you draw a line across, you hit the labor demand curve. So this is going to be the number of workers who are going to be employed. This is going to be employment at the minimum wage because that's going to be the number of workers that will be demanded by employers who will be employed. But yet at the minimum wage, you continue drawing line across, the number of workers who want to go to work or supply their work is on the labor supply curve. So it's a labor supply with minimum wage. So you can see clearly at the minimum wage, labor supply exceeds labor demand by this much. So this gap that exists is what we call this is surplus labor, or you can call it structural unemployment. So at a minimum wage, more workers want to work than what employers want. Okay, so some workers are going to be unemployed. There's structural unemployment right here, that gap, which you can read it from down here. The amount labor supply with minimum wage, people want to supply their labor demand is here. So the amount by which labor supply exceeds labor demand is what we're calling the what? Structural unemployment. So minimum wage can cause structural unemployment. And as I said, because minimum wages in Europe are so high, labor regulation in Europe is more stringent than the United States. That means in Europe, there's higher structural unemployment than the United States. That's clear. But labor economists in America have done research. Minimum wage in America does not affect everybody because most people, especially college graduates like you, when you get a job, you're going to get a job with somebody's going to pay you really $20 an hour. So raising the minimum wage, say from $7.25 to like $11 or $12 will not affect you because you already earn way more than the minimum wage. But minimum wage has been found, economists have found that it affects like workers who are unskilled workers, like high school dropouts, teen workers, workers who are just entering the labor market without any skills. Those are the ones who get affected by when minimum wage get raised, but not a vast majority of American workers are actually not going to be affected when the government raises the minimum wage, because you earn way above the minimum wage already. And then the second cause of structural unemployment, another cause of structural unemployment could be unions. A union is an association of workers that bargain collectively with employers over wages, benefits, and working conditions. You know that if you are in the union, if you're a union employee, you earn a lot more than non-union employees in the United States. If you work for the auto, we have the United Auto workers, they're part of the union, like GM, General Motors. All their workers workers who work for GM, General Motors are in the union. You earn a ton of benefits and wages compared to workers who work in Walmart. Walmart employees are not part of a union. Okay, so in Europe again, union workers dominate over non-union workers. In fact, one country, if you go to countries like France, the percentage of workers who are in the union that go as far as 90%, 91%. Austria is a country in the world with the highest number of the highest percentage of union workers. Okay, about 98% of Austrian workers are in the union. You ask me, what about the United States? What's the percentage of American workers who are in the union? You're going to be surprised. Maybe only less than 24%. So unions are not very strong here in America. In fact, you come to the South, like Texas, Midwestern United States, the only place you go to Midwestern is Wisconsin has got very strong labor unions. And then government workers tend to be in the union. And then northern states like California, and then there's places like New York. Those are the places where there's going to be strong labor unions. But you come down the South, nobody cares. Okay. So unions can provide value for workers and employers alike. Excessively strong unions, though, have an effect similar to minimum wages. If you have because unions negotiate for higher pay for their workers, and if they are very strong like they are in Europe, they're going to force the employers to pay ridiculously high wages, which are above equilibrium. So when you think about the diagram we saw before, the union wages are going to be even much higher. This could be like what we call union wage, because unions set very high wages, way more than the minimum wage. So that is going to even see the gap between labor supply and labor demand. Labor supply is here, labor demand at that union wage. That gap, that structural unemployment is going to be even bigger. Okay, so union wage causes what? Structural unemployment. And that explains why unions are more powerful in Europe than the United States. That also explains why there's very high unemployment rates in Europe. And then this is what we call employment at will doctrine. We want to talk about. An employee may quit and an employer may fire an employee at any time and for any reason. So there are many exceptions to the at will doctrine, but it's the most basic US employment law, unemployment law. That, the employer has the right to fire you at will for whatever reason they deem is necessary for their company, the benefit of their company. Employment protection laws have the following effects, though. They create valuable insurance for workers with full-time jobs. If you have some kind of employment protection laws, your job has got some protection. It makes labor markets less flexible and dynamic. It increases the duration of unemployment and increase unemployment rates among young, minority, or otherwise riskier workers. Yeah. So employment protection laws are very common in Europe. Okay, and that also explains why there's high unemployment in Europe. So look at the employment protection laws. In the United States, they are very low. We have very lower employment protection laws. In Europe, there's a lot. That explains very high. Places like Greece, Germany, France, the unemployment rates, long-term unemployment is going to be really high in those countries. The more stringent are the labor employment protection laws a country is enforcing, the higher is the unemployment rate. There's a positive correlation between that. So hiring and firing, firing costs increase long-term unemployment. So the employment at will doctrine says that employment can be terminated, okay, at any time for any reason. That's right. Problem. Okay. There you go. So let's talk about some active labor market policies. So policies such as work tests, job search assistance, and job retraining programs that focus on getting unemployed workers back to work. So you could think about these types of policies that the government could put in place that could solve the unemployment problems. Some of these problems, some of those policies are very weak in the United States, by the way. I travel to Australia quite a bit. They have a very strong policy in Australia, which says that if you lose a job, to prevent you from collecting only government benefits in Australia, the government offers you a public training program because they're going to ask you, why are you not working? They're going to say, I lost my jobs because I don't have skills in the industries. Oh, so we're going to train you. So there's public training programs, retraining programs that focus on getting unemployed workers back to work. And then policies such as work tests, job search assistance exist in some of those countries, but not here in America. In America, if you lose a job, you're on your own. You have to hustle on your own for the most part to find your next job. But in some countries, actually, there's a lot of assistance that are given to the unemployed to help them, find their next job quicker. And that also helps the government remove a lot of those unemployed workers on government unemployment insurance or welfare. So the factors that can increase structural employment: large, long-lasting shocks that require the economy to restructure, oil shocks, shifts from, these are additional other factors, from manufacturing to services, globalization, technology shocks, and labor regulations, unemployment benefits, minimum wages, powerful unions, and employment protection laws. And the factors that can reduce structural employment may include job retraining, we talked about that, job search assistance, work tests, and early employment bonuses. There's another type of unemployment which we call cyclical unemployment. So cyclical unemployment is correlated with the business cycle. So I'm going to say this. Think about it. First of all, there's no such a thing as zero unemployment. Okay. So first of all, even if the economy was doing super well, like the Clinton good days of the 90s, where you may lose a job at 8 and find one in the afternoon. If the economy was doing that good, jobs are plentiful. There's still going to be somebody there without a job. So first of all, the general rule is that there is no such a thing in an economy. There's no such a thing as zero unemployment. No, it's not going to. There's going to be some unemployment that exists even if the economy was doing very well. Okay, so let's say that the unemployment, suppose in good times, when I say good times, times when the economy is doing well, when the economy is doing well and operating at full capacity. Let's say the unemployment rate is I'll say 5%. So there's still going to be like a 5% unemployment rate. Okay. But then let's assume that if that happens, the economy was doing well, the unemployment, so I discarded my whatever. Anyway, so we're saying that the unemployment rate was what? Unemployment rate is 5% during good times. During good times means a time when the economy is doing very well and operating at what? Full capacity. Still, there's going to be somebody without a job. And we have already explained the reason why some people may not have jobs, even if jobs are plentiful out there. The obvious reason. One of them could be lack of information. That would be some of the things that cause frictional unemployment and structural unemployment could be things that can, that's the reason why we still have unemployment of 5%. Unemployment will never be zero, even if the economy was supercharged and doing super well. Okay? Because of lack of information about available jobs. Maybe the jobs that the economy has created are for engineers and economists. If somebody graduated with a degree in political science or history, there's a good chance they may be unemployed because the skill sets that the employers are looking for, they may not be having it at that time. Or it could be some people move. If you move from one city to another, you're not going to find a job immediately. Now, if the economy goes through business, because the economy is always going through business cycle fluctuations, the economy goes through upturns and downturns. So during downturns, during recessions, unemployment rises above that 5%. Because recession means the economy is doing bad, there's low GDP, low production, so high unemployment is going to go up. So let's say, suppose during recession, let's say unemployment ends up at, like, say, 7.5% with a recession. So now you can see that the additional 2.5%, because in normal times when the economy was normal, when the economy was not being, going through a recession, we already had 5% Americans who were unemployed. Now, when the economy goes through a recession, more people are going to lose their jobs. So that means the unemployment rate is going to rise from 5% to 7.5%. So the additional 2.5% unemployment is what we're calling cyclical unemployment. So in this case, cyclical unemployment would be 7.5, which is the actual unemployment numbers, minus 5%, which is 2.5%. So what have we learned? I want to open a new slide here because the author of your textbook doesn't bring this point very clearly, but I want to make sure that you get the distinction between the two. So okay. So what we're saying is that we talked about natural rate of unemployment. So cyclic, frictional and structural. So when the economy, the unemployment that exists when the economy is doing very well, that 5%, when the economy is producing at its full capacity, but still there's going to be some people unemployed. That unemployment is what we call natural rate of unemployment. So natural rate of unemployment is unemployment which exists when the economy is operating at full capacity or at its full potential. Still, there's going to be some American without, and that unemployment, that natural rate of unemployment includes things, two unemployment rate that we already discussed. So the formula is that natural rate of unemployment is the sum of frictional unemployment, which we already discussed, and plus structural. So the reason why some Americans may still be unemployed even if the economy is doing well, the economy is supposed to be operating at its full capacity or full potential. It could be due to frictional unemployment or structural unemployment. And structural unemployment, we already talked about it. It could be due to unemployment due to automation. Structural changes happening in the economy. The economy is moving from more into technology stuff. AI, data science, machine learning. That is displacing a lot of Americans who don't have skills in those new technology sectors. Or it could be due to lack of information, which causes frictional unemployment. It could be due to geographical mobility of workers to different cities. That's the reason why that 5% may exist. So natural rate of unemployment is a sum of frictional plus structural unemployment. And we already discussed at great length what the causes of frictional and the causes of structural unemployment. Things like strong labor unions, you know, strong labor regulations, especially those we see in Europe, minimum wages, you know, those kind of stuff. Large economy-wide shocks like oil price shocks. Those are things that cause structural unemployment. Okay, so now that means, so now we say that natural rate of unemployment for the United States is always estimated to be about what? Economy is estimated to be about 5%. That even if the economy is producing at full potential, 5% unemployment might still exist. Now, then we now have to have a connection. The actual rate of unemployment that the government reports to us is a sum of two things. So I say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's the federal bureau that is in charge telling Americans what the unemployment rate is in the previous month. They tell us every month. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is going to look at what? Why am I thing not working here? This is only a second. Okay, there you go. Okay, so then the actual unemployment rate. Now let's talk about this. What's going on here? Okay. What's wrong with my pen? Can't work. I didn't just lose my battery power here. It's kind of. Let me delete this and see what's going on. Just hold on a second, guys. Trying to discuss what that actual unemployment, because I need to write on the screen so you see what is really going on here. Okay, made this work. So the actual, just what's going on here? They're not. I know. Anyway, I'm not sure why this thing is not. My pen cannot work here. Okay, so the actual unemployment rate, I'm just going to say this verbally, actual unemployment rate is going to be the sum of cyclical unemployment and natural rate of unemployment, because I told you the natural rate of unemployment is which is frictional plus structural. That's the unemployment rate that exists when the economy is supposed to be operating at its full capacity or at full potential. And it includes a sum of frictional and structural. But cyclical unemployment is unemployment which is due to the business cycle. When the economy goes to a recession, the additional unemployment that the economy is going to add is going to be what we're going to be calling what? Cyclical unemployment. So that means the actual unemployment rate that the government report to us is going to be the sum of cyclical and natural rate. I hate this pen. What happened to it? See, technology can break us down, yeah? We don't know what's going on. Anyway, we'll figure something out here. Let's see. Control. Okay, there you go. We're back to business. Okay, so that's what it. So we're talking about the actual unemployment that the government reports to actual unemployment equals to is a sum of natural rate of unemployment okay, this is unemployment plus cyclical unemployment. So what I said was that when anytime the economy is doing well, the economy is operating at its full capacity, this guy is estimated to be around what? Around 5% natural rate of unemployment. So when the economy, suppose the economy goes to what? A recession, then the actual unemployment rate. So if the economy is at full employment, produces at full employment, cyclical unemployment is going to be 0. When you're what? The economy is producing at full capacity or full potential or producing at full employment. Unemployment level will never be 0. So, but cyclical unemployment would be 0. So that means all actual unemployment would be equals to what? To its natural rate. So when the economy goes, so in a recession, actual unemployment is going to rise above, it's going to be greater than what? Natural rate of unemployment. Like I told you, when the economy goes to a recession, unemployment may jump to 7.5%. So the amount by which actual unemployment exceeds natural rate of unemployment when the economy goes to a recession is what we're going to be calling cyclical unemployment. So cyclical unemployment is going to be positive when the economy goes to a recession. And then economy sometimes can overproduce, economy can produce beyond its full capacity. If the economy produces beyond full capacity, then the actual unemployment rate can fall below its natural rate. That means cyclical unemployment is going to be negative. If the economy produces beyond full employment, then actual unemployment rate could be like the numbers that the government have been reporting to us since like 2 years ago. 3.6%. So you can see that 3.6 is less than the natural rate of 5%. So that means if this is 3.6% when the economy produces beyond full employment and a natural rate of unemployment is 5, so to get cyclical unemployment, you got to subtract 5 from both sides. So that means cyclical unemployment is going to be negative 1.4%. So let me say that again. Cyclical unemployment is going to be 0 if the economy is producing at its full capacity or full potential. It's going to be positive if the economy goes to a recession. And it's going to be negative if the economy is producing beyond its full capacity. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. So you can see these are business cycles. See this pale grayish looking bars you're seeing, those are the times when the US economy, I did not include the COVID recession. If you go to 2020 here, there's a COVID recession. So, but anyway, this pale looking grayish, whatever, bars you're seeing, those are the times when the US economy experienced economic recession. You can see that in any recession, unemployment, like the 2007-2009 recession, unemployment rises. And then when the economy is anything in between those pole or two pole looking bars, that's a time when the economy is growing, economy is expanding. So unemployment falls when the economy is growing. See that? But when you enter another recession, unemployment rises. It always rises during recessions and falls with expansion. So unemployment increases dramatically during a recession for two reasons. When GDP is falling, firms often lay off workers, which increase unemployment. Idle labor and idle capital hurt the economy's ability to create more jobs. So Keynesian economics think that cyclical unemployment is caused by deficiencies in aggregate demand. We'll talk about that later when we talk about a chapter on aggregate demand, aggregate supply. Okay. So cyclical unemployment is going to increase when the economy is what? When the economy is in a terrible recession. And it falls to zero when the economy goes to full employment. So cyclical unemployment is going to be correlated with the business cycle, because business cycle is this up and down swings in the economy. Economy going to recession or going through what? Going through economic expansion and recessions, yes. Up and down times in the economy. And I talked about natural rate is a rate of structural plus friction. You know the formula. So you can write the formula in full. That's the formula I wrote earlier on here. When I say natural rate of unemployment still there equals to frictional plus structural. Okay, so is right here. So you can write basically in full. You can just say natural rate again to reemphasize that of unemployment is a sum of structural plus frictional unemployment. Okay. So natural unemployment rate, the underlying rates of frictional and fractional unemployment change only slowly through time as major long-lasting features of economy change. So cyclical unemployment can increase or decrease dramatically over a matter of months because due to economic upturns and downturns. The natural rate changes only slowly through time, and the actual rate of unemployment varies around the natural rate. That's right. So actual rate of unemployment is going to be above natural rate of unemployment when the economy is in a recession. You see, actual unemployment may rise to 7.5%. That means above the 5% natural rate that I told you. And then it's going to fall below that 5% when the economy produces beyond full employment. So you could think about that. So the blue line you're seeing there, that is the actual rate of unemployment, basically rotates around its natural rate. Natural rate is about 5%. See the orange looking line. It's about the same, all periods, flat. So that means anytime the blue line is above the orange looking line, that means the economy is producing in a recession. So actual unemployment rises above its natural rate. So you would argue that at this point, during the 2007-2009 financial crisis, before the financial recession hit, unemployment was about 5%. But once the recession hits, see, the actual unemployment rises up to about 10%, 10.1%. So that additional 5.1% was due to the recession. That is the cyclical unemployment, would be positive. And then when the economy is supercharged, you can see that we can produce unemployment, actual unemployment falls below what is natural rate. So that in that case, the cyclical unemployment will be negative. So let's go back again to the labor force participation. So the labor force participation rate is a percentage of the adult, non-institutionalized civilian population who are working or actively looking for work. So labor force participation rate, you take the total number of unemployed and unemployed divided by adult population, or just simply the labor force divided by adult population times 100. So in 2017, the labor force participation rate was 62.8%. How do we know that? There were 160.1 million Americans who were in the labor force. So that's the total number of unemployed and employed added together. But if you divide that by the adult population, that was 255 million. Then you multiply by 100, you get 62%. So that means 62% of adult population were participating in the workforce in 2017. So the labor force participation rate is affected by life cycle effects and demographics. Though. We know that. Yeah, like you can think about it, age range. Americans between the age of 16 to 19 who are just entering the workforce, about 35% participation rate. And then the labor force participation is always highest America between, you know, within Americans, so Americans were between what, the age of 25 to 54 years. That's 80.9%. And then 65 plus was only 18.6% because people at that age, 65 plus, some are retired already. Remember, when you retired, you drop out of the workforce. So you're not part of you're not in the labor force, you know, you're not participating in the labor force anymore. And then this is a natural rate of unemployment by country. You can see it's always what? Natural rate of unemployment. See that, like in Japan, it's like 85.2%. Belgium, 33.9%. The United States, surprising, was at a higher rate there for natural rate of unemployment. So self-check, labor force participation is affected by life cycle effects and demographics. We just talked about that. And these are some of the key takeaways, which are basically a summary of the chapter. So this concludes my discussion of the labor force and the unemployment, labor force participation rate, and how we compute unemployment rate, and the different types of unemployment and what causes those different types of unemployment. So make sure you watch the video. As always, I'm going to assign some assignments based on this, maybe quiz number, I believe it's going to be quiz 6 or homework 6, whatever it is. Up to this point, I'm left with only about 3 short chapters. I'm going to be recording them. My idea is that by Monday or Tuesday, I should be done with all the chapter recordings, all posted. I've already posted all the chapters, the PowerPoint slides. So it's gonna go, so it's chapter 26, which, you know, 27, 28, no, 26, 29, 30, I believe. And then 31, maybe 32 and 35. You'll see them at Canvas. Those are the chapters that are gonna be on the what? On the final exam. I believe there's 7 chapters. Okay, we'll talk about it, the next chapter, another time. Thank you. Bye-bye.